Omar Artan stood in the fluorescent light of Miami International Airport, holding a valid U.S. visa and a diplomatic passport. He was the reigning African Referee of the Year, handpicked by FIFA to represent Somalia on the world's biggest stage. Within minutes, U.S. customs officials turned him around, cited vague vetting concerns, and forced him onto a flight back to Istanbul. He never saw the grass of a World Cup pitch. FIFA's response was a bureaucratic shrug and a full payment of his tournament fee. They paid a man to stay away. This is the central paradox of the 48-team World Cup. It was marketed as the ultimate expansion of the beautiful game. It was sold as a global festival of inclusion across 3 massive nations. Instead, the first round revealed a tournament that is technically sophisticated but humanly hollow. The numbers tell a story of greed. The borders tell a story of exclusion. The technology tells a story of failure. The world was invited to a party it couldn't afford to enter. To understand the scale of the disaster, you have to look at the gatekeepers. A World Cup is only as global as its visa policy. While FIFA President Gianni Infantino spoke of unity, the reality at the border was a cold filter. Omar Artan was the most high-profile casualty, but he was far from the only one. Thomas Partey, the engine of the Ghanaian midfield, was reportedly barred from entering Canada for a crucial match against Panama. Ayman Hussein, an Iraqi striker, spent 7 hours in a windowless room at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. Security forces inspected his private messages and photos before finally granting him entry. Talal Salah, the Iraqi team photographer, wasn't so lucky. He was detained for 10 hours and then deported without explanation. Even the highest levels of football diplomacy were not immune. The president of the Palestinian Football Association was left stranded in Mexico City after the U.S. denied his visa. When you look at these names, a pattern emerges. The exclusion wasn't random. It was geographic. Supporters from Ivory Coast and Senegal reported systemic visa denials. One organizer was told bluntly that certain nationalities were simply not wanted on American soil. The world was coming together, provided they had the right passport. For the teams that did manage to cross the border, the welcome was often indistinguishable from a criminal investigation. When Senegal's national team touched down, they weren't met with fans or flowers. They were met with individual searches and heavy security. The Uzbekistan delegation was greeted by narcotics dogs. Uruguay's luggage was subjected to the same treatment, and a paperwork error delayed their entry so long that it forced a secondary flight. This logistical mess wiped out a scheduled press conference for their manager, Marcelo Bielsa. These are elite athletes at the pinnacle of their profession. They were treated like suspects in a high-stakes sting operation. This atmosphere of suspicion set the tone for everything that followed. It signaled that the hosts viewed the tournament not as a celebration, but as a security threat to be managed. Then we must talk about the money. The financial architecture of this World Cup is designed to extract every possible cent from the fan. For the first time, FIFA implemented dynamic pricing. This is the airline model, where prices fluctuate based on real-time demand. The result was a barrier to entry that shifted the World Cup from a sporting event to a luxury commodity. Let the numbers sink in. In 1994, the last time the United States hosted, a ticket could be had for $25. By Qatar 2022, the entry point had climbed to $69. For this tournament, the top-tier seats for the final were listed at $32,970. That is a 20-fold increase from the previous high. Semi-final tickets in Dallas and Atlanta were priced north of $10,000. Even a standard group stage match involving the U.S. was listed at nearly $3,000. These are not just high prices, they are predatory. The secondary market was even more surreal. FIFA operated its own resale platform with no price ceilings. It was a digital Wild West. At one point, a single seat for the final was listed for $11.5 million. After the initial sellout, prices on the official site frequently ranged from $10,000 to $60,000. But here is the most damning statistic. FIFA, which claims to be a non-profit organization dedicated to the growth of the game, takes a 15% fee from the buyer and another 15% from the seller. On every astronomical resale, FIFA collects 30% in pure commission. They didn't just build a stadium, they built a casino where the house wins on every hand. This blatant profiteering caught the attention of the Attorneys General of New York and New Jersey. They launched an investigation into whether fans were misled about seat locations and whether FIFA's own tactics artificially inflated the market. The investigation highlighted a particularly cynical move. FIFA originally sold seats in 4 standard categories. Later, they quietly introduced new front categories, which effectively demoted those who had bought early. Fans who thought they had secured front-row seats were pushed back to make room for higher-paying latecomers. Between October and April, ticket prices for 90% of the matches were hiked by an average of 34%. This hit the hardest in Mexico. It is a country where football is a religion, yet a single ticket for the opening match cost the equivalent of 10 months of median wages. Fans who traveled to Russia in 2018 for $5,000 found that the same amount wouldn't even buy them a seat in their own home stadium. President Claudia Sheinbaum was forced to remind FIFA that football is more than just a business. Her plea fell on deaf ears. For FIFA, the fans are no longer the lifeblood of the sport. They are the harvest. Even those who could afford the tickets weren't safe. Paul Dufresne spent $720 on tickets for his daughter and himself. Days before the match, FIFA canceled them, alleging fraudulent activity. His bank confirmed there was no fraud. FIFA offered no explanation. By the time he reached a human representative, his seats had already been resold to someone else. He was part of a group of nearly 500 fans who had their dreams deleted by an algorithm. Others used platforms like StubHub only to receive cancellation emails minutes after kickoff, while the same tickets remained listed for higher prices. The system didn't just fail, it actively cannibalized its own customers. This leads to the most embarrassing visual of the first round. Despite FIFA's claims of record-breaking demand, the cameras told a different story. During South Korea's clash with the Czech Republic in Guadalajara, the stadium was littered with empty seats. FIFA's official attendance report claimed a near sellout. They explained the visible gaps by claiming fans were standing in the concourses. It was a transparent lie. You do not pay thousands of dollars to stand by a hot dog stand when the world's best players are 50 yards away. Gianni Infantino had bragged that demand exceeded supply by 10 times. If that were true, there wouldn't be a single vacant plastic chair in North America. The truth is that the pricing model finally hit the ceiling. People stayed home because the cost of entry had become an insult to their intelligence. The chaos on the pitch was just as pronounced. The opening night in Mexico City was supposed to be a showcase. It turned into a nightmare of poor officiating and civil unrest. The match between Mexico and South Africa saw 3 red cards. One of them, issued to South Africa's Zwane, was widely criticized as being overly harsh. To fix the perceived lack of transparency, FIFA introduced a new system. Referees would explain VAR decisions over the stadium public address system. It was a disaster. The referee's English was so heavily garbled that the 60,000 people in the stadium couldn't understand a single word. It was a moment of peak irony. The transparent World Cup was being explained in a language no one could decipher. Outside the Estadio Azteca, the situation was even more dire. Hooded protesters clashed with riot police, throwing Molotov cocktails and bottles of flammable liquid. Some demonstrators managed to storm Gate 8 before a total lockdown was initiated. In the city's central square, the Zocalo, 50,000 people crammed into a fan zone that became a dangerous crush. The event had to be shut down prematurely to prevent a tragedy. This wasn't the world coming together as promised. This was a city under siege by its own excitement and the incompetence of the organizers. The beautiful game was being played against a backdrop of tear gas and sirens. The technology that was supposed to ensure fairness also buckled under the pressure. During Qatar's match against Switzerland, a critical penalty was awarded after a VAR check. Every television replay suggested the player was offside. The world waited for the semi-automated offside lines to appear on the screen, a staple of modern football broadcasting. They never came. Hours later, FIFA admitted the system had suffered a technical outage. They asked the fans and the teams to simply trust that the decision was correct. Gary Neville, speaking live on air, didn't mince words. He called the lack of evidence a dictatorship. When the people you pay to broadcast your product start using words like dictatorship, you have lost the narrative. The integrity of the results was now being questioned because the expensive machinery was broken. Even the flow of the game was sacrificed for the bottom line. FIFA made 3-minute hydration breaks mandatory for every match. On the surface, this was a player welfare initiative. In practice, it was a commercial window. Fans in Boston, Toronto, and Dallas booed the breaks because they happened in mild weather and destroyed the match's momentum. The true purpose was revealed when Fox Sports cut to full-screen commercials during these breaks. They returned to the action so late that the match had already restarted. Viewers at home missed live gameplay, so a broadcaster could sell insurance and trucks. Player welfare is a convenient shield for corporate greed. When a goal is missed because of an ad break, the sport is no longer the priority. It is merely the filler between the commercials. Then there is the issue of the untouchables. Lionel Messi is the face of this tournament. His hat trick against Algeria was a masterpiece of skill. But the game was overshadowed by a moment where he stepped on a defender's calf. It was a clear bookable offense, and many argued for a red card. He received nothing. The incident reignited a long-standing grievance that the rules are different for the superstars. Whether it is a conspiracy or subconscious bias, the perception remains that FIFA needs its icons on the pitch at any cost. This undermines the very concept of a fair competition. If the rules are negotiable for the famous, the tournament loses its soul. It becomes a scripted entertainment product rather than a sport. The most heartbreaking story of the first round, however, was that of the Iranian national team. They arrived in a country with which their government has no diplomatic relations. Their fans in the diaspora were eager to see them, yet FIFA allowed a situation where the coaching staff and support personnel were systematically denied visas. 10 members of the delegation were initially blocked. Only 4 were eventually let in. The team was not allowed to base themselves in the United States. They were forced to stay in Tijuana, Mexico, and cross the international border for every match. Imagine the psychological and physical toll. They endured 5-hour border crossings on match days. As soon as their matches ended, they were ordered to leave the country immediately. No recovery sessions, no rest, just a forced march back across the line. Inside the stadium, the cruelty continued. Fans who brought the pre-revolutionary Iranian flag to protest their regime had them confiscated at the gates. FIFA deemed the flags too political. It is a stunning display of hypocrisy. FIFA claims to stand for human rights and political expression when it suits their marketing, but they will silence oppressed fans to maintain a sanitized image for their hosts. The Iranian players were treated like intruders in a house they were invited to visit. Their coach called them the most oppressed team in the history of the tournament. He was right. Their experience was a microcosm of everything wrong with this World Cup. It was a triumph of border security over human dignity. To round out the absurdity, the England national team had their training equipment stolen before they even reached Kansas City. In any other World Cup, this would be the lead story. Here, it was a footnote. When a major robbery is the least concerning thing that happened in a week, you are in a state of total systemic failure. The sheer volume of incidents is overwhelming. A referee deported, players detained, fans priced out, tickets canceled, empty seats, broken technology, commercial interruptions, border crossing marathons for athletes. It is a relentless barrage of mismanagement. This isn't just a series of unfortunate events. It is a fundamental betrayal of the sport's purpose. The system did not fail. It succeeded in every metric FIFA actually cares about. The revenue is soaring. The corporate partners are happy with their ad slots. The host nations have demonstrated their border control prowess. The fact that the fans are suffering and the players are being treated like cargo is secondary. This World Cup was designed to be a giant vacuum for global wealth. The football is just the excuse to turn the machine on. We are witnessing the final stage of the sport's transformation into a pure extractive industry. The first round was a disaster because it pulled back the curtain on this reality. It showed us exactly what FIFA thinks of the people who love the game. There are still moments of beauty, of course. We saw Congo earn a point that will be remembered for generations. We saw young players announcing themselves to the world. We saw Messi's enduring genius. But these moments are struggling to survive under the weight of the organization's greed. They are like flowers growing in the cracks of a concrete parking lot. You can admire the flower, but you cannot ignore the concrete. The tournament is moving into the knockout stages, where the stakes are higher and the pressure will only increase. If the organization was this fragile during the group stage, the coming weeks could be catastrophic. The honeymoon period is over, and the marriage between FIFA and North America is already looking like a toxic arrangement. We were promised the biggest and best World Cup in history. We were told it would be a celebration of the human spirit. Instead, we got a lesson in late-stage capitalism and bureaucratic coldness. The numbers don't lie, and they point to a tournament that has lost its way. When the history of this event is written, it won't be the goals that define the first round. It will be the empty seats, the massive price tags, and the people who were turned away at the door. The game is still there, somewhere, fighting to be seen, but it is getting harder to find. FIFA has spent decades telling us that football belongs to everyone. The first round of this World Cup proved they don't believe a word of it. The beautiful game is being held hostage by the very people who are supposed to protect it. Is this the version of football we are prepared to accept? We are watching a world where the stadium is a VIP lounge and the border is a wall. The noise of the crowd is being replaced by the sound of the cash register. The first round was a warning. It told us that the World Cup is no longer a tournament for the world. It is a tournament for those who can afford the premium. As we move toward the final, we have to ask ourselves what will be left of the sport when the money is finally counted. The soul of the game is being sold in 15% increments. The game deserves much better.